Community Development Specialist, Nabeel, and as you can clearly tell, an aspiring fitness model. Daniel, who are you?
Put me on the spot. Yeah, man, I'm resident nice guy. You can find me around the Halton region walking nice old ladies across the street.
Awesome, awesome, and more importantly, we are joined by Angela Belgard, who is and this is me being vulnerable here. Angela, correct me if anything I say is not pronounced or said incorrectly, but she is band member of Treaty 4 of Pepe Cassis Cree First Nation. She's lived in Halton for 15 years, and her experience is vast in corporate, Indigenous, and Aboriginal relations. She's also the Indigenous lead for our Kids Network, which I must say she has done an absolutely fabulous job. And she's been in that position for a year. And one of her mandates is to develop strategies to respond to the 94 calls of action that have come out of the Truth and Reconciliation work. Angela, have I done you justice?
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. And I really appreciate you taking a shot at trying to say my band name. You did really good. So Treaty 4 is in Southern Saskatchewan, and Pepexies First Nation is, Pepexies is how you say it, Cree Nation, First Nation. So we are a mix of Cree and Dakota and Lakota. Indians out there, and we belong to the File Hills Colony. So yeah, you did pretty good, and I appreciate you being vulnerable, and I think that's an excellent example of what we would like all people to do. As an Indigenous person, let me tell you, it takes some time for me to even get my tongue around some of the First Nations names out here in Ontario, just because it's a different language. It may be Cree dialect up north, but it's a different, I believe it's the Y dialect. There's two dialects in Cree, Y and TH. So they're similar, but different. So totally appreciate that. And thank you. I'm so happy to be here, everybody.
Thank you so much, Angela. And this is why we have you on the show here, because you're a wealth of knowledge and just a pleasure to be around. So thank you, Angela. And you might be wondering, who else do we have with us? And I'm going to let Daniel have the pleasure of introducing our good friend Marcus.
Thank you. So joining us to kind of help us unpack this conversation around Indigenous land acknowledgement is Marcus Logan. Marcus is a very well-known bridge builder here in Halton. I'm sure everyone who's joined the call has met him, sees him, knows him, or recognizes his name. You get the pleasure of seeing him today. Marcus has spent time on the Temagami First Nation, where he developed connection with land and water. And that's where he started to learn how to work with allyship, Indigenous elders, and communities to build bridges towards action around truth and reconciliation. So we've asked Marcus to join us in today's conversation as well.
Fantastic. And guys, before we begin, which is we're going to talk a little bit about land acknowledgements. It's been a topic of discussion for a little while, especially amongst community partners. I want to do a land acknowledgement as I would traditionally do it. Again, leaving myself vulnerable for Angela and Marcus and everybody here to be able to see, is that the best way to do a land acknowledgement? Are we doing justice to the land acknowledgement when we read it in such manners? So without further ado, I would like to read it as I would, and I would love to get feedback from Marcus and Angela to see if that's something that is doing it justice. So here we go. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all the creation gives us and provides us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabeg peoples have utilized this land for millennia, and we would like to acknowledge their direct descendants, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land upon which we live, work, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationships and responsibilities to both the land and our original peoples. A+, what would you say?
I think I could give you an A on that, but Marcus, I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to speak with one voice and non-Indigenous voice. So I'm the white guy in the room speaking today. And I really appreciated some of that territory acknowledgement. It's actually one that I haven't heard. So I thought you were going to read the one that the town reads. That's like 4 paragraphs long. But really what strikes me in doing territorial acknowledgements and what I've learned and what my friends in the Indigenous and First Nations communities have taught me is that it really needs to mean something to the person that's reading it, or not reading it, but stating it. So, and one thing that Angela teaches me is when you're doing an acknowledgement, like it's always a good idea to look out your window. So I'm just wondering, Nabeel, were you able to look out a window when you were look out the window to see what's happening outside and what the weather is, what the trees are doing? But probably not, right? Because we're just so used to reading a statement without a whole lot of careful and real-time thought about what's happening around you. So I've learned that, and I have been asked to write and develop territorial acknowledgements for many organizations, just simply because of a lot of my connection to that community and my work at the library as community engagement, and I work with this community. So I always ask people to really think about the land that they're on, because it's a territory and a land acknowledgement, right? It is about the land, and there needs to be a bit of education around that statement. And so, and I always try to tie it back to maybe the event that we're at, or to something that's happening outside my window as well. And so if I was asked to do that territorial acknowledgement this morning, I probably would have said something about, well, I would, maybe I'll do one, because I kind of knew that we were doing this today, and I really, like the Indigenous communities, I do give thanks every day for a lot of things. And that's how I start my day, and that has just naturally been a part of who I am. And so then when that was taught to me, that lots of Indigenous folks start their day with Thanksgiving to whatever in their lives, it resonated with me. And so I'm really, really careful about when I'm doing conversations about this, because I knew that sometimes people say, can you just do the territorial acknowledgement, Marcus? And which is fine, because I want to talk about, when we get into it, about the non-Indigenous white colonizer doing a territorial acknowledgement. That's another conversation we'll probably get into a little bit. But I would have said something today about that on my way here, I was acknowledging the sun, and in the morning that brother sun was coming out of the clouds to remind us that it is a new day, and every day is a new possibility, and today's going to be, there's lots of new possibilities. And then of course I work at Central Library on 16 Mile Creek, is in my background. You can't see it, but it's there. And every day I'm greeted by a flock of geese who are going through their day and their business. And when you watch geese fly and you watch them on the land, nurturing the land and eating from the land and living in the water, having babies, having their families, and living off the land, it reminds me that we need to work together as a community, and they share responsibility, right? Like there's always one geese that's flying in front, and then you'll see that one go to the back and somebody else will take forward. So I think that's a really great teaching. The two-leggeds teach me, and I see them every day. And so I would be acknowledging the role of geese in my day, around telling me that it's time to do good work, and to share the lead, and to be a community.
Fantastic. And just Marcus, on that, if you were to ask me to repeat what I just said in terms of the land acknowledgement, I wonder how much of that would I even remember what I just said, right? Like, I think there's a difference between reading it and learning it. And I think, to your point, like, yours was so much more personalized to what is around you. And I'm wondering, Angela, how much do you, like, how can we get there, right? Like, how would you critique what I just read and what Marcus has just shared?
Yeah, I think that there's so much discussion and controversy, and I've been in this role with Our Kids Network as the Indigenous lead for just over a year, and it continues to astound me that the territorial acknowledgement is one of the topics that I get almost weekly emails about. Can you help me do one? I'm having an event. How do I do one? I don't want to do one because it's not authentic. Like, there's so much hesitancy about it. And I always say that everybody has the resources to do a territorial acknowledgement. You have a heart, which is where the authenticity comes from, and you have a brain. And you can think about the land. I always say, look out the window or stop, and think about the land that you are on right now, or that you drove across to get to work. What did you see? And if you don't remember seeing that great big tree that has been here for hundreds of years on Bronte Road when you're going to work, how come you didn't see that? And obviously, hopefully you're paying attention to traffic, but how come? And how come that big lake that is, crosses this region, and the creeks that feed into that lake? When was the last time you really paid attention to that land? And I think that is always the first thing that I think about, because it's the land that connects us all. Whatever, if you're a newcomer, if you're an Indigenous person, if you've been here for a couple generations, whatever, it is what connects us all. And that whole interconnectedness is something that we talk about a lot, but I don't know if we really think about this. We know it's good to be connected and all things work, but for Indigenous people, it's one of our base values, is understanding how we are connected to the land, because that connects us all. So I really like what Marcus is saying. This is about a reflection and respect for that land. It is more than the reflection, it is understanding that, but then respecting what we see there. So I have lots to say about this, but maybe we want to talk a little bit about why people don't say one.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so in full disclosure to the folks that are joining us today, one of the reasons we got connected with Angela is because the town was rolling out these virtual programs, and me being who I am was, had this grandiose ideas. I want to have an intentional land acknowledgement when we start these programs. I'm not just going to read something. That's not what we want to do. And just sort of, locating myself in most things in the communities, I have to recognize my privilege and seek guidance. So that's what we did. And, Angela, one of the first things you said was like, well, if you have good intentions and you have a heart and a head, that's enough. And, even still to this day, like I struggle even after that guidance to kind of know, well, what am I, because I feel like I want to get it right. So what are the components that I need, or that anyone needs in order to kind of carry out, a land acknowledgement that is appropriate? Well,
there's so much there what we can talk about. First of all, getting it right. I mean, that's great intentions. And when you approach any of this, anytime you approach a relationship with the intent of getting it right, there's also there's a vulnerability there, and there's a recognition that you might not get it right. And so just to be open to the fact that I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do it right. And I think that's really important. It's like Nabeel on the top trying to say Papixies, Cree First Nation. Tough one. And I love when people try to say it, right? So it's that vulnerability is important, and the authenticity, and that's the heart. But Marcus, maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about why you think some people have always come to you. Like what do you think their reasons for being concerned about it are?
So yeah, I think it is, and I had written down the words being vulnerable when Nabeel wrote that or said that, because I think that's one of the keys of doing a territorial acknowledgement, is acknowledging that you're going to be vulnerable and you're going to probably say it wrong. But I think what I've learned is to be vulnerable is to have a conversation with a knowledge holder and ask about, how do I say Anishinaabe? How do I say, right? How do I pronounce this? How is the correct pronunciation? And practice is a good thing. I think that, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, because the territorial acknowledgements have been around. We used to call them land acknowledgements, and they've been around for a number of years, and they become like reading that paragraph, right? And then for me, as watching that happen in our community, in our meetings, it became like that checkbox, right? That diversity checkbox. We did it, we checked, nothing. So there's no learning behind it. So I think the one thing that I try to model as a non-Indigenous person and a white colonizer or settler whatever word you choose to identify me as a white person, is that it is my responsibility, right? Like it is my responsibility as a white person and a non-Indigenous person to do this work and to learn and to understand the truth and to work towards the reconciliation. Right? It is not just up to our Indigenous folks to fix what has happened in Canada. It is up to us to fix it. And so I really took that as like it's me that I need to be. I want to represent. I want to model that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say it wrong. I probably still say it wrong, even though I've said them many, many times. And like I just realized that I kind of screwed up my territorial acknowledgement this morning, or just 10 seconds ago, when I forgot to acknowledge Chief Laforme and the Mississaugas, right, as the treaty holders of the land that I'm sitting on and using right now. So I think people are just afraid of the language and getting it wrong and it not having a meaning behind it, or I think people are uncomfortable too just reading a statement because they know deep down that it doesn't mean anything to me as the reader, and I don't know if I'm connecting with that person sitting in the audience. That are they understanding anything that I'm saying either as well, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes uncomfortable for the person reading it.
I echo what you're saying, and that's what one of the other things though that I've come across is people don't want to say it because they're not sure if it's even meaningful to Indigenous people. Like, am I saying this? Do Indigenous people does this mean anything, or can they tell that it's just reading? And those are really important questions. And I guess, so my question to you, Marcus, then, is that Chief Laforme.
Yes.
You forgot to put to acknowledge them. Do you think Chief Laforme is going to take you to task on that? How would he handle that? Or anybody who maybe forgot, not just you, because you have a personal relationship. He'd probably shame you for not doing that.
Yeah. I was going to say he would take me aside and have a conversation with me, but just as a friend, but not publicly. No, he would actually, he would thank me and acknowledge the work that I put into an acknowledgement and for being vulnerable and for recognizing the First Nation and the land. Yeah. So no, I don't think, and I've never been. No Indigenous person has come up to me after doing a territorial acknowledgement to say, by the way, kind of thing. Right?
Exactly. And that's exactly the point I want to make, is that when you take the step to try and to get it right and to do your best, and you say it from the heart, I don't think most Indigenous people are going to take you to task. They'll guide you, and maybe next time you might want to say this or include this. But, Indigenous people typically recognize when there is an effort made to understand and that you've learned and you've done the research. I'd like to invite any of our participants here that if they have something they'd like to add, please make sure you use your reaction features and, to put your hand up or, even clap or thumbs up, and also use the chat box to maybe tell us a bit about your experiences. And your thoughts about this, because it's something that is kind of a constant thing right now. And let's just get to that point about not sure, don't know whose land it is, because that's part of the head, right? Like this is don't know and not sure. There are no time in Canada's history, I think, have there been such rich resources to find this stuff out. We now have the Canadian Encyclopedia, which I know you can take out at Oakville Public Library. Marcus, you guys have, I think, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final reports and all of that. There's tons of resources out there. Of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out of, in the inquiry and hearing the stories about residential school survivors. And I know, Marcus, you have a number of resources there. And thank you, Jenny, for putting up the OPL's references to that. But I think, it is incumbent, as Marcus, you're saying, it is incumbent on all Canadians to understand whose land they're on, to get the names as right as they can, because there's really no excuses. If you go on YouTube, you can find, and you just put in, how do I say Haudenosaunee? It tells you. There's so many. York University has a fantastic example and discussion around this. It's an 8-minute video, easy to find. It does pronunciations. There's an app for that, and it's called Whose Land. Put it on your phone. You type in where you are. You could be North Halton region. You can be here in Oakville, and it'll tell you who's the traditional territory you're on, as well as what treaties are associated with that particular area. And let me tell you, if you don't know what treaty area you're in, you better find out, because those treaties are really important things to learn about for all Canadians, because they are signed agreements for all Canadians. So I really, really would encourage everybody to take that step, find the resources either through a public library, on the internet, because there's no excuse. There's no excuse to know whose land you're on.
Yeah, the latest link I've posted in the chat for the Our Kids Network is these are the resources that Angela shared with me last week. And Whose Land, the York University acknowledgement, and some great resources are all there. Highly recommend that link, and thank you, Angela.
Yeah, You're welcome.
I think, can I just add something about that, Angela?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of my chat function. We just had Treaty Week, and we did a lot of talking about treaties and trying to understand treaties. And I think it's really important for all Canadians to really understand that this is the relationship that Indigenous folks have with Canada, right? And it's something that we need to understand. I think there's also talking about that fear. We've been doing Treaty Week events for a bit here in Oakville with Chief LaForme and lots of folks that are interested in learning. And some of the fear is that the First Nation is going to want their land back and kick us all off, right? And that's not what we're asking. That's not what a land claim is. That's not what a treaty is. It really is working together and stewarding it together and living on it together and sharing those resources. And I think the more people understand that treaty, what the treaty is, what treaties are, and how they do form, or they should be forming, the relationship between the Indigenous and the Crown.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. There's lots of great information out there about treaties, because they are negotiated agreements, and out east here. So I already said I'm from Treaty 4 area, and those are negotiated treaties where we like to think we are negotiators. Here in the east, it's such a great history here, because they started with peace and friendship treaties and then went to negotiated treaties. So I would really encourage everybody to look into that, and to, of course, look, and I'll tell you, Mississauga's of the Credit First Nations website has a lot of great information out there. So does Six Nations website. So that's a great place to start and learn about the Haldeman Tract and the different treaties, and learn what a peace and friendship treaty is, and learn about the Dish with One Spoon treaty territory, because that's so important. Especially as we move towards truth and reconciliation. And that's, again, another reason why we do territorial acknowledgements. The truth and reconciliation is really about making Canada a better place for everybody, including Indigenous people. And if you're not informed, you better get informed. And there's no excuse, because the social media out there, our young Indigenous people they're amplifying Indigenous voices every day in so many ways. And you look at your glass of water there, and you're so happy to drink that, and there's no hesitation. But I can tell you, there's too many communities in this first world country where Indigenous people are living for decades without water that they can drink. And to me, that's a shame. And if we think about, what do Indians want? That's what a question I get all the time is, what do you guys want anyways? Well, certainly we want our treaties to be upheld. And part of that is that we want proper housing like anybody else. How can you live and thrive and be part of Canada if you don't even have a shelter, a place, a safe haven? And in our time of this pandemic, this is where we're hunkering down, and to be safe. I can tell you, Indigenous people across Canada don't have that in many communities. So this is why we talk about the land. when we look at that land, and as Marcus says, I usually get people to stop and look and think about the land, because when we say what we see, we are acknowledging and making it real. And that's what the territorial acknowledgement is about. We are respecting that we are on shared land. We're all in this together. And we need to build the best Canada we can, not where Indigenous people are always trying to get their rights met and to live in the same kind of world that that most Canadians live in.
So well put, Angela. And I'm just looking at the time, and I want to respect everybody because we have a really wide representation, actually. And thanks to everybody for joining from across Ontario. Actually, we have a good representation. So if I want to just summarize some of the key takeaways here, it is better to learn than to read. Right. And I think if we want, like for all of us, myself included, if you want to do a checkbox to see if we read the territorial announcement, then read it by all means, right? If that's your objective. But if you want to reflect and if you want to learn about the land that we're on, the land that we're sharing, I think it's an important aspect for all of us to truly reflect and be vulnerable. Right. And so be allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. And I just want to share a quick story as an immigrant, as a first generation immigrant. I learned about the discrimination that immigrants experienced throughout Canadian history before I learned about Indigenous history, right? That speaks to a lot of the power dynamics, right? And not to say that any of those discriminations should have valid or one holds weight more than other, but there were Indigenous peoples before any one of us were here. But it just speaks to how stories are told. And I think now that I know that, I need to give voice to that community that, you know, might not have it. And if I'm struggling with the land acknowledgement, like it speaks to me that I need to internalize that information and be an ally, be an advocate. And I think we need to utilize this really good space of doing land acknowledgements as a platform to learn more about it. And I'm being completely honest because I want people to know that, you know, I recently came to learn that Oakville is on Treaty, is it 13 and Treaty 22, Angela? I didn't know that before, right? And that's got to be on me. And I think it came because I was doing these territorial announcements and I was like, it's a checkbox for the most part. So I really implore people in this space to consider that, you know, yes, we need to do the land acknowledgement, but what does it mean to you? Right? Because it can mean so much to you. And on that note, the last question I want to ask you, and maybe open it up to the floor if you guys have any questions, is what can us as individuals or organizations do to amplify the territorial announcement, but also the experiences of our Indigenous brothers and sisters?
Marcus, can I turn that to you to just kick that off?
Thanks, Angela. I'll talk about Oakville Public Library. And so for us, it's we are actually Libraries and Archives of Canada have a call to action. So number 69 in the call to action is our responsibility. And so we have, as a system, you know, a lot of people went ahead and put the plaque on the wall with that territorial acknowledgement. And then that's kind of, again, that checkbox, and it just sits there. It doesn't really mean anything. People don't look at it or don't see it. But we were doing a lot of active truth and reconciliation events. We take a look at how the systemic racism that's built into our library system. So things like the creation stories being categorized as fables in the Library of Congress, how we file books, right? So we're looking at changing that and really pushing that within our systems, in the library system right across North America too. And we do a lot of we engage with the community a lot. We support in-kind support or financial support, however we can do it. We support those voices and those artists, and we connect and partner with our Kids Network and Angela and Oakville Truth and Reconciliation Committees and the First Sagas and Six Nations and Grandmother's Voice. And so it's very, very, we're very active. We just finished up the red dress displays. We did the Treaty Week. So it really is about and amplifying those voices too, Nabeel, is, somebody asked me, an artist that I'm working with right now asked me point blank, well, who are your Indigenous employees? And I said, I don't know, because we don't ask that question. We don't, and nobody's come forward to self-disclose. So I started having that conversation in my management meetings and just within the hallways, kind of thing. Like, I had this experience with an Indigenous person, and I told the story, and I have had two self-disclosures of First Nation or Indigenous status in the library as employees now. And so now I know that the actions that I'm doing and the things that I'm doing visibly and actively are really making positive effects in their lives and in their work lives, which is important.
I think, and I would just, I know that our time is tight here, and thank you, Marcus, for kicking that off. And I think how we can amplify voices is by get involved, go onto social media, find those Indigenous voices, retweet, share, do whatever you can, and get involved. There are things happening slowly but surely, but Our Kids Network is here. Marcus is here. There's things that you can get involved in. There's ways to learn. Be an ally. Stand up, ask the questions like Marcus did. How many Indigenous employees am I working with? Am I being a good colleague to an Indigenous person? I don't know, because I don't know if there's any there. How come? Ask questions. Ask the questions. Use your voice. Be an advocate. Be an ally. Start thinking about how to work together to make Canada better.
Can I just say one thing before we go? I don't know if we're gonna go, but I really want to be careful about that word ally. Like, we don't want, as white folks, like, we don't want to become that white savior coming in to, save the Indigenous folks again. So for me, an ally is walking with person and standing in between the racism and the crap that happens, and helping to defend Indigenous folks and Black folks. So let's be careful about not being the white savior ally.
I love it.
It is a whole other topic.
It's a whole other topic, guys. Anyways, I've left my email there if anybody wants to get a hold of me and ask more questions.
Perfect. I definitely, I know that folks need to jump off, so I'm very grateful for everyone for joining. And I was just going to suggest, Angela and Marcus, if you're comfortable being resources, please feel free to give them leave them in the chat. And I know 30 minutes isn't a lot of time, but if folks are leaving this feeling like they don't have a distinct answer on how to conduct a territorial announcement, I feel like that's probably the appropriate thing. That it's a moving thing that you have to have intention and just build your capacity. And it shouldn't necessarily be easy because it requires some self-knowledge. Like it requires you to seek out some of the information you need to know to perform it confidently. So I think part of the reason, to kind of bring it back, Angela, is the reason I had to reach out to you for it is because I myself was not educated enough in how to articulate an authentic territorial announcement that I was comfortable with, because I'm not comfortable with my own knowledge. Yeah.
Well, I hope you feel better about that. I did put up quickly while Nabeel was talking some components that I think we spoke to through this conversation on a PowerPoint slide. I hope everybody saw that. But again, everybody has the resources to do this. You have a heart to make authentic, and you have a brain to go think through what the land means to you, and to go and find out whose land you're on, and just acknowledging that. So I'd like to say miigwech and hi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, all.
Tune in next week.
Yes, next week for you Oakville locals, we will be unpacking the history in Oakville. And I would imagine that some of our knowledge of Indigenous learning will be incorporated in that discussion as well.
Thank you. I'll stay on for a little bit longer if you need me to.
Sure. I'm just noticing that it's just us. So let me stop. Thanks, guys.